It is a Mac and Mac edition of Birds 365 on a Thursday thereafter edition. Yeah, now the rebuilding begins, or so Eagle fans hope. How much change is going to come after the Eagles loss to Tampa Bay on Monday night? I haven't had a chance to talk about it with my buddy, my partner, Johnny Mac, just yet. We'll do some of that today, but we'll also be looking ahead to what changes are coming and people's opinions on it. And man, there's a lot to parse out over the next 2 hours here on Birds 365. Johnny Mac, first thing first, glad you had safe travels, got up and down from Tampa, back into the cold that is here, the Northeast. And some people thought the cold was going to blow in an early firing of Nick Sirianni. Well, it could have happened Tuesday morning or Tuesday night or yesterday or last night. It hasn't happened yet. There are reports out there that the Eagles are investigating coaching changes, but not necessarily the head coach's position. Today's a pretty big day because Sirianni is supposed to meet with both Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman. What do you read into the hours since the Eagles were officially eliminated from playoff contention with the fact that their head coach is still their head coach?
Yeah, well, I always thought the head coach would still be the head coach, so it's no surprise to me. But I will say that not over yet. I mean, he hasn't met with Jeffrey Lurie yet, so that'll likely happen today. And until that meeting happens, nothing is off the table because we saw it with Doug Peterson. And I've said it numerous times, Jody. I mean, they went into that meeting, Jeffrey Lurie, with the assumption that Doug Peterson was going to be back. And he didn't like what he heard. And all of a sudden things changed. So the odds are Nick Sirianni is going to be the head coach of this team. It was never going to be a emotional decision, as poor as that performance was. That generally isn't the way Jeffrey Lurie does business. Now, maybe if they were 3-13 or 3-14 for consecutive years, yeah, he would have just fired him right away. But he was always going to listen and take his measured approach, and that's where we are in this particular process. So odds are he's going to be back. If Jeffrey doesn't like the plan, just as he didn't with Doug Peterson back in 2021, that can change. So, we're basically all mulling over one guy's decision, and, that can change in a whim. So, if you're excited about a potential Nick Sirianni exit, I would temper that. But if you're assuming 100% he's back, I'd also temper that a little bit.
Let me ask you about that. And I think for the most part, it's good. But it sounds like the meeting that they're going to have, judging by history for sure, but just in general, has a lot of weight on a decision of whether you're going to keep a coach or fire a coach. And it certainly should have a lot of weight. But should it be the ultimate decider? He's been the coach for 3 years. He's made the playoffs for 3 straight years. He has just finished up one of the most epic collapses in the history of the Philadelphia Eagles. Shouldn't a performance over 3 years weigh more than what's going to be said in behind a closed door in Jeff Lurie's office with he and Howie and Nick in a room together?
Well, I think that's the whole reason he does business the way he does business, because it is about the entire enormity of the 3 seasons. It's not about one game in Tampa. It's not even about 7 games at the end of this season. If it were, he'd be fired. So yes, but Jeffrey's very analytical from a standpoint of he wants things going in the right direction from a philosophical standpoint. So if that derails in his mind, not to say he's right or wrong or middle of the road or indifferent, but if that's off the rails from his standpoint and Nick Sirianni doesn't have a plan to correct it, Yeah, for instance, we'll go back to Doug again. Doug wanted to move forward with Press Taylor on offense. He had Matt Burke on defense. If it wasn't Matt Burke, he wanted Corey Unlin. And Jeffrey wanted outside voices. He might want outside voices this time around. How does Nick Sirianni handle that? These are all the questions that have to be answered. But there's a report from Diana Rossini that Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni are reaching out to potential coaches out there. So there's going to be significant changes on the coaching staff. And I think Nick already understood that. And we'll see who he pushes out. One of the unfortunate things about this industry is there will be scapegoats when expectations are not met. And Jeffrey Lurie has not been immune to that, certainly. So coaches will lose their job. I do not believe it will be the head coach. And we're in that process. Then the clock really starts on Nick Sirianni next season. And if he has another poor season or another season where the expectations are not met, because it's funny how, and it was a terrible ending, don't get me wrong, but still 11 wins. I mean, it's hard to call it a poor season overall, but that's where we are. And a season underwhelming or another collapse would certainly put him in major peril next year, but that's a long way off.
John, I do want to break down the usage of one word, and you use it, and I use it, and at times I think it's been very applicable, and that's scapegoats. We both on Birds 365 sat here and said, who's Jeff Lurie going to scapegoat this time? Because I think he has done it in the past. Would you consider removing, firing, not bringing back, call it what you want, Matt Patricia, Sean Desai, Brian Johnson scapegoating?
With Brian and Sean, certainly, not necessarily with Matt. And that's not a criticism of Matt. I mean, Matt was put in an untenable situation. I've been saying it, and we haven't been together since the game. But, for all the people that want Nick Sirianni fired, I think your arguments are in the wrong direction because they're all talking about the offense. The offense has been terrible. But that's one of the worst decisions I've ever seen, the move that late in the season for a 10-3 team. And again, it started at 8-1. So for me, it's for an 8-1 team to completely change coordinators. They can use whatever wordplay they want to use because they never changed the titles, but they changed the coordinators. And Slade talked about it yesterday, compared it to a marriage, being married to two different women. They want two completely different things. It's just insanity. And I said, if that's the head coach's decision, Nick Sirianni continues to say it was his decision, that's a fireable offense. The offense didn't play well. They didn't execute. They didn't, the players who are supposed to be stars didn't perform like stars. And I think people are hyper-focused on that because offense is always the most exciting part, the lead part. That decision was an abject disaster. Any way you look at it, up and down, it made no sense from the standpoint of Sean Desai. Okay, behind the scenes, we don't get to see behind the scenes. Maybe Sean Desai was completely overwhelmed and not prepared for that job. It's possible. He had been a defensive coordinator before. I find it very hard to believe. They talked him up. Then he's the worst coordinator in the world. And somehow they got worse when they brought in another defensive coordinator. That is where I would start if you want Nick Sirianni out. But as far as with those three names, I would say the only one, because they already scapegoated Sean Desai. Let's be honest, that's in the rearview mirror. Brian would be more of the scapegoat than Matt. I would say.
Well, I didn't ask you who would be. I didn't ask you to put them in an order. I'm asking, would you consider
Yes,
their
Brian. Yeah, Brian. Yes, Matt. No. Brian. Yes, Matt. No.
And Desai already has been scapegoated,
Yeah.
so there could be a potential new level. I don't know about you, but getting fired is worse than getting demoted for me. So here's how I feel. I don't think it's scapegoating for any of them, because my definition of scapegoating includes the fact that it's above and beyond, that it wasn't necessary, that you're unfairly pointing a figure and or taking an action against that individual that doesn't really deserve it. And I don't think any of them deserve to be back. I think they all deserve to be elsewhere next year and looking for new jobs. I don't think any positions with the Philadelphia Eagles. So I would come up short of calling any of them scapegoating. Now, I might just have a different definition of scapegoating than you, John, or anybody else. I do factor in what I consider to be unfairly, because if you're going to use the word, you're making a value judgment yourself. You're considering it scapegoating when you say this person has been scapegoated. I guess I'm kind of giving Jeffrey / everybody involved a bit of a pass here, because if the 3 coordinators, which is friggin' weird to begin with, that the Philadelphia Eagles used this year are all told their services no longer necessary, I got no problems with any of it. I am okay with all of them being fired. And is scapegoating anytime you fire anybody? Not to me. I don't know that there will be scapegoating.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's not always. I just said, from my perspective, Matt would be no. And he was put in a bad position, but shouldn't have been put in that position. So from that standpoint, it belongs on the head coach. Yeah, I think both Brian and Sean should have been back, for the reason that people have to grow in their positions. Look, I think this team, and I'm the first to raise my hand, with the expectations. Now, I've been saying that consistently. We're out of control to begin with. At 10-1, they reached Bieber pitch level out of control. So that part of it is something maybe you can't control, but you should understand it. And you should also understand you had 2 really good coordinators, and the assumption that the next 2 would be the exact same immediately is ludicrous, and the organization should understand that. So people need to have an opportunity to grow in their particular positions. That's same argument I used with Mike Rowe, pun intended. He was growing in the position. He was getting better. But people wouldn't accept him for whatever reason. Now, in the case of Brian and Sean, they need an opportunity to grow in the position. Look, continuity is not a guarantee of success, but you can look all over the league and the teams that are more successful. So, I mean, it's a way better way to do business. Now, you have to make original decisions if you make wrong decisions. And that's why I leave it more open-ended with Sean, because of what happened. Clearly, they thought they made a wrong decision, because when you start talking about making changes like that when you're 8-1, something else is going on. There's something else going on, because you just don't even think that way at 8-1. With Brian, yeah, I mean, and then you're affecting the quarterback as well. So the assumption is you're not getting rid of Jalen Hurts. I mean, so what are you trying to do? You're trying to antagonize the quarterback as well, who took a step back for the first time in his career, not only his career in the NFL, but his career as a football player going back to college. That's the one thing everybody said about Jalen Hurts. He's improved every year, incremental improvement. Even when he got benched in Alabama, he improved that season. He improved. Bang.
Yeah, then let me ask you this, John. If he's done that, which he has, went from Alabama, got replaced, went to Oklahoma, whole new coaching staff, whole new coordinator, gets drafted into the NFL, whole new team, whole new head coach, new offense coordinator. Next year, whole new coach, new offense coordinator. And he improved that entire time, right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you do it again? Why would you run in fear of it? Why would you go, oh, you don't want to upset Jalen Hurts. You don't want to put him to the test. You don't want to do that. He's done it every single time. If every single year there's been change. Why would I worry about, oh my God, you don't want to fire Brian Johnson because it might upset Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts been dealing with him for the last 5 years.
Well, it's not. Look, I mean, a lot of people can play the, and I'm an old school guy, play the old school game. It shouldn't matter, suck it up. But the reality is modern sports is modern sports. You see it in every sport. I mean, superstars, and he's a superstar, whether you believe he's a superstar or not.
So you wouldn't do it because he's reached superstar status and level?
Well, I wouldn't do it because you acquiesce to what the superstars want, and everybody does it. In this town, the best example of it would be the Sixers and Joel Embiid. Maybe it's not a good thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's just reality of modern sports. You want to piss off the quarterback on top of everything that you're dealing with. I don't know. You can do it. I'm not saying you can't do it. And by the way, maybe Jalen Hurts says, you know what? I don't care. The assumption
by the way, that's probably what he's going to say, because Jalen Hurts doesn't take too many harsh stances. He kind of just goes flat level on basically. Well,
that's in front of the camera. When we were let in the locker room after the game, very long cooling off period, as you can imagine. First thing we saw as we walked in the locker room, Jalen Hurts and Brian Johnson sitting there together, having a very in-depth conversation. They're close. And do you want to impact the quarterback as well? Maybe you do. Maybe you want to upset him. Maybe you want to unsettle him. Maybe you want to send a message to him. I'm just saying that's typically, I'm saying typically that's not the way it happens in modern sports. That's what I'm saying.
So I do want you to answer this one question. Les Bowen scheduled to join us coming up in just a couple of minutes. You just noted that it's been a complete trajectory for Jalen for his entire career. Gets better. Improvement to the high of the high heights last year. He went backwards for the first time. Somebody's got to have an explanation to it. There's got to be a reason for it other than just, well, he was due to go backwards because you can't keep that trajectory up forever. But there really should be something tangible. If they're going to look for answers from Nick Sirianni today as how he's going to turn this thing around, and answers are important, what is the answer as to why Jalen went backwards? And is it fair for me to speculate? And that's all this is speculation. It's not good that he is as tight with his offensive coordinator that he is. That at each of his improvement steps, he had a relationship with the offensive coordinator and the head coach. And the one thing that changed this year was he got a guy that he's known since he's been a kid to come in and be his offensive coordinator. Is that not a fair conclusion?
Well, I don't. The fact that they met each other when I believe Jalen was 4 years old, I think is a little bit overblown, because it isn't like Brian as a, high school players hanging out with a 4-year-old. He just met him, and they haven't really, he recruited him twice in college. By the way, he didn't get him either time. So, it wasn't like this Queen singing Best Friends Forever song. They got together here. They knew each other. They had a great relationship as a quarterback coach and a quarterback, and obviously moves on to be offensive coordinator. I would argue, to your point, Jody, people have already made the assumption, a lot of people, I'm not saying you, but a lot of people have made the assumption he didn't regress, and it's the coach's fault. That's why we're here. It's Sirianni's fault. It's Brian Johnson's fault. It's Alex Tanny's fault. It's everybody's fault but the quarterback himself. So once I would say to those people,
you buy that?
Which is it? No, the quarterback regressed.
Yeah, so
the assumption is
I are on the same page there.
But a lot of people are on a different page, and they've already made that decision that it's because of the coaches that he's gone backwards. I would argue, I've seen Jalen Hurts successfully handle a blitz many times since 2021. Many times. Same head coach. Yes, different offensive coordinator, but the head coach is in charge of the offense. There are hot routes in the offense, believe it or not. There are sight adjustments in the offense. And by the way, for fans who think there aren't, think about what that is. Sight adjustment. That comes from the receiver and the quarterback on the field. They had a really difficult time with zero blitz. By the way, Jason Kelce, Cam Jurgens, two of the worst games they ever played in Tampa. Awful, awful. And Jason Kelsey's one of the greatest offensive linemen of all time. Played a bad game. It happens. Cam Jurgens played a worse game. It happens. That didn't help in that particular 60 minutes of football. Yeah, a lot of it goes on the quarterback himself. And Jalen talked about that yesterday. He's got to look in the mirror. He's got to evolve as a player, and because he's going to see a bunch of zero blitzes next year. Jason Kelce ain't going to be there, no matter when he wants to announce it on New Heights would be my guess, his podcast. But yeah, I mean, first of all, for the people who already are making excuses and it's about all the coaches, well, if it's, you can't have it both ways. My belief is continuity is better than the alternative. This organization certainly believed in Brian Johnson before the season and for many years, with 3 years. Now, with Sean Desai, it's a little bit different because he came from outside. They clearly thought they made a mistake. Which is it? You got to choose one side of the fence. My side of the fence is I think coaches need time to grow in their positions.
Yeah, I think there were expectations before. They unrealistically high? Probably. Did the Eagles underachieve massively? Yes. That's why I'm okay with either of the two coordinators being shown the door. Yes, continuity is better, but continuity at least has to in part be earned. You can't start from zero and try and work your way. If you've got talent, the Eagles had talent coming into this season and they finished as awfully as they did. They surely didn't raise expectations. So if you don't make the top level expectation, I think you got to be closer than what the Eagles ended up at. That's why I think there's going to be a change on both coordinator positions. That's just my guess. That would also be the way I would handle it if I were Jeff Lurie and Howie Roseman. All right, he's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. We have our guy, Les Bowen, in the green room. He's ready to jump in with us. You've gotten some of our takes from what the hell happened here at the end of the season and how the immediate future will or won't change around the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll give you another wise veterans look at it and how's this going to play out for the Eagles when Les Bowen joins us next here on Birds 365.